Veltar stood in the white halls of the Thylorian Command Center. His skin was pale blue and his large black eyes showed no emotion. He was young for his kind, only 200 years old. The older Thylorians around him moved with the same cold purpose that marked their entire race. Observer Veltar, called High Commander Zethian. Her voice was flat and empty of feeling. You have been chosen for a special mission. Veltar walked forward and stood at attention. His people had learned long ago that emotions were wasteful. They made decisions based on logic and data alone. War was something they had moved beyond centuries ago. Why fight when you could simply calculate the best outcome and negotiate? The humans have begun their first war among the stars, Zethian continued. They fight against the Kralix Empire. Our council wants to study how primitive species conduct warfare. You will observe and record everything. She handed him a small device. This will make you invisible to their sensors. They will not know you are watching. Document their tactics, their weaknesses, their methods. When they lose this war, we will have valuable data for our archives. Veltar took the device. How long do you expect their defeat to take? Our calculations show 3 weeks at most. Humans are emotional creatures. They make poor decisions under stress. The Kralix are brutal but organized. The outcome is certain. Veltar nodded. This would be easy work. He had studied human history in his training. They were a young species, barely 500 years into space travel. Their weapons were crude, their ships slow, and their military tactics came from ground warfare on a single planet. Against the Kralix Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds, they stood no chance. The transport ship took him to the edge of human space. The war had just begun 3 days ago, when Kralix forces attacked human colonies in the Outer Rim. Now the human fleet was moving to respond. Veltar's target was a human ship called the Aegis Dawn. It was a frigate, medium-sized by human standards but tiny compared to Thylorian vessels. As his shuttle approached, he activated his cloaking device and prepared to board. The human ship looked rough and practical. Its hull was scarred from use and weapon ports lined its sides. Everything about it seemed designed for fighting rather than exploration or diplomacy. Veltar found this disturbing. His own people had not built a warship in over 1,000 years. He materialized on the ship's bridge, invisible to the humans around him. The first thing that struck him was the noise. Humans were talking over each other, calling out reports and moving with quick, jerky motions. It was chaos compared to the silent efficiency of Thylorian operations. "Captain on deck," someone shouted. A man in a dark blue uniform entered the bridge. He was tall for a human with short black hair and tired eyes. This was Captain Lee Do-hyun, according to Veltar's files. He was 35 years old, which made him middle-aged by human standards, but practically an infant by Thylorian measures. "Status report," Captain Lee said as he sat in the command chair. "Kralix forces have taken the mining station at Beta Centauri," reported a young woman at a console. This was Lieutenant Park Minji, the tactical officer. 3 civilian ships escaped, but we lost contact with the rest. "How many people were on that station?" The captain asked. "About 2,000, sir. Mostly miners and their families." Captain Lee's face showed pain. Veltar found this reaction puzzling. The people were already dead or captured. Feeling sad about it would not change anything. Why waste energy on useless emotions? "Set course for the Kepler system," Captain Lee ordered. "If the Kralix are following their usual pattern, they'll hit the research station there next." "Sir," Lieutenant Park said, "our orders are to rendezvous with the main fleet at coordinates." "I know what our orders are," the captain interrupted. "But if we follow them, a lot of innocent people will die while we're sitting around waiting for paperwork." This made no sense to Veltar. Military efficiency required following orders and maintaining proper command structure. Captain Lee was letting his emotions override logical strategy. The ship moved toward the Kepler system at maximum speed. Veltar observed the crew as they prepared for battle. In the engineering sections, a man named Song Minho worked on the weapon systems. He talked constantly while he worked, making jokes and laughing with his team. Veltar had never seen engineers behave this way. Thylorian technicians worked in complete silence. In the medical bay, Dr. Choi Hyeran checked her supplies and equipment. She was small and quick, with gentle hands that moved with practiced skill. When a young ensign came in with a minor injury, she treated him with care and asked about his family back home. Again, Veltar was confused. Why waste time on personal conversation when efficiency demanded focus on the task? The Marine section was even stranger. Sergeant Kim Jae-won was leading his squad in preparation for possible boarding actions. But instead of simply drilling combat techniques, he was talking to each Marine individually. He asked about their concerns, made sure they felt ready, and even shared stories to keep their spirits up. "Remember," Sergeant Kim told his squad, "we're not just fighting for orders or territory. We're fighting to protect people who can't protect themselves. Every civilian ship that gets away safe is a victory." Veltar recorded all of this behavior in his files, marking it as evidence of human inefficiency. These people were wasting precious time and energy on emotions when they should be focused purely on tactics and survival. The ship reached the Kepler system 18 hours later. The research station there was small, with maybe 500 people aboard. Long-range sensors showed no sign of Kralix forces yet. "Minji, run a full scan of the system," Captain Lee ordered. "I want to know about every asteroid and piece of space dust." Lieutenant Park worked at her console with intense focus. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls and her eyes never left the displays. After several minutes, she looked up with concern. "Captain, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures near the gas giant. They're faint, but they match Kralix stealth technology." "How many ships?" "Hard to tell with the interference from the planet's magnetic field. Could be anywhere from 3 to 7 vessels." Captain Lee stood and paced behind his chair. Veltar could see him thinking, weighing options. A Thylorian commander would have run the calculations instantly and chosen the most logical course. But humans seem to think with more than just logic. "Options?" the captain asked. "We could retreat and call for backup," Lieutenant Park said. "With support from the main fleet, we could come back in force." "That would take at least 4 days," said the communications officer. "The research station can't hold out that long against a Kralix assault." "We could evacuate the station," suggested the first officer. "Load everyone onto civilian transports and run." "The transports are too slow," Sergeant Kim said from where he stood near the tactical station. "Kralix fighters would catch them easily." Captain Lee continued pacing. "What about a direct assault? Hit them before they're ready?" "Sir," Lieutenant Park said carefully, "even if there are only 3 Kralix ships, they're bigger and better armed than we are. Our chances of winning a straight fight are less than 30%. Veltar waited to see what the captain would choose. Logic clearly demanded retreat. The humans could not win this battle, and attempting to fight would only result in their own destruction along with the research station. Any rational being would preserve their forces for a battle they could actually win. But Captain Lee stopped pacing and turned to face his crew. "We didn't come out here to run away when people need help. Minji, I want you to work up a battle plan." Something unexpected. "Jae-won, get your Marines ready for anything. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." The bridge erupted in activity. Veltar watched in amazement as the crew threw themselves into an obviously hopeless task, with energy and determination. They should have been afraid. They should have been demanding retreat. Instead, they worked together with a unity of purpose that surprised him. Lieutenant Park began developing what she called creative tactics. Instead of approaching the Kralix ships directly, she proposed using the gas giant's moons as cover and the magnetic field to mask their approach. It was risky and depended on precise timing, but it might give them a small advantage. Dr. Choi prepared the medical bay for casualties. She moved with calm efficiency, but Veltar noticed her hands shaking slightly. She was afraid, but she was working anyway. Fear should have paralyzed her or made her demand retreat. Instead, it seemed to make her more focused. Sergeant Kim briefed his Marines on possible boarding actions. He told them they might need to evacuate civilians under fire or take control of station systems if the research team couldn't do it themselves. His soldiers listened with serious faces, asking practical questions about equipment and procedures. Engineer Song Min-ho worked to boost the ship's weapons and shields. He pushed the systems beyond their normal limits, accepting that this might damage them permanently. "If we don't win this fight," he told his team, "we won't need to worry about maintenance schedules." As the ship moved toward battle, Veltar found himself paying more attention to individual humans than to their military tactics. Communications specialist Han Soo-young sent personal messages to the research station, warning them to prepare for evacuation while trying not to cause panic. The battle began with fire and chaos. The Kralix ships opened fire as soon as the Aegis Dawn appeared on their sensors. Red energy beams cut through space, missing the human ship by only a few hundred meters. Captain Lee had ordered maximum evasive maneuvers, and the ship twisted and rolled like a living thing trying to escape a predator. Veltar gripped the nearest console to steady himself, even though he was invisible and the humans could not see him. His people's ships moved smoothly through space with gravity control that eliminated all sense of motion. This wild spinning and diving was completely alien to him. "Return fire," Captain Lee shouted over the noise of alarms and status reports. The Aegis Dawn's weapons spoke back at the Kralix formation. Blue energy beams and missile trails reached out toward the enemy ships. Lieutenant Park had targeted the lead vessel as planned, concentrating all firepower on a single target instead of spreading it around. "Direct hit on their port shields," Park reported. "Enemy shields down to 60%. Keep hitting them," the captain ordered. "Minji, what are the other ships doing?" "Two of them are moving to flank us. The other two are staying near the station. It looks like they're preparing to attack it." Veltar watched the tactical display with growing confusion. The Kralix were following standard military doctrine, but the humans were not. Instead of trying to defeat the entire enemy force, they were focusing everything on saving the civilians. This was tactically unsound but seemed to be working somehow. The research station sent out a desperate call for help. "This is Kepler Station to any friendly ships. We're reading 5 Kralix vessels in the system. Our shields are failing and we have no weapons. Please respond." "Kepler Station, this is Captain Lee Do-hyun of the Aegis Dawn. We're engaging the enemy now. Begin immediate evacuation procedures. Get your people to the civilian transports." "Captain, we have over 400 researchers and support staff. The transports can only carry half that number." Veltar expected Captain Lee to make the logical choice: save who you can and accept the loss of the rest. But instead, the human captain's face hardened with determination. "Then we'll make sure those transports get multiple trips. Hold your position and keep your people calm. We're not leaving anyone behind." This was impossible. The math was simple. The human ship could not hold off 5 Kralix vessels long enough for multiple evacuation runs. Captain Lee was promising something he could not deliver. But the crew of the Aegis Dawn acted as if their captain's promise was completely reasonable. Engineer Song Minho pushed the ship systems even harder, giving them more speed and firepower. Navigator Yoon Tae-hyuk calculated routes that would keep the civilian transports away from enemy weapons. Communications Officer Han Soo-young coordinated with the station to organize the evacuation. The first Kralix ship began to return fire more effectively as its crew recovered from the surprise attack. Energy beams hammered the Aegis Dawn's shields, causing lights to flicker throughout the ship. "Shields down to 40%, called the engineering station. 2 more Kralix ships moving into attack position," Lieutenant Park reported. "Captain," the first officer said urgently, "we need to withdraw. We can't handle 3 ships at once." Captain Lee looked at the tactical display. Veltar could see him calculating the odds just as any Thylorian commander would. But when he spoke, his words showed he was thinking about more than just numbers. "How long until the first transport is loaded?" 8 minutes, Han Soo-young answered. "Then we hold for 8 minutes. Minji, give me something creative." Lieutenant Park's fingers flew over her controls. "I'm reading a debris field near the station. Old mining equipment and asteroid fragments. If we can maneuver the Kralix ships into it, do it." The Aegis Dawn suddenly changed course, diving toward the research station instead of away from it. The move caught the Kralix by surprise, and their formation had to adjust to follow. But now the human ship was flying directly toward the most dangerous part of the battle. "Sir, this course takes us right into their weapons range," the first officer warned. "I know," Captain Lee said calmly. "That's the point." Veltar watched in amazement as the human ship flew straight at the enemy formation. This was not tactics. This was madness. Yet somehow Lieutenant Park was using the ship's smaller size and greater maneuverability to advantage. She wove between the larger Kralix vessels, forcing them to be careful with their aim to avoid hitting each other. The debris field that Park had spotted was thick with metal fragments and chunks of rock. The Kralix ships, built for open space combat, had trouble navigating through it. Their larger size made them clumsy among the obstacles, but the Aegis Dawn moved through the debris like a dancer. Lieutenant Park anticipated every hazard, and helmsman Bae Ji-won responded to her commands with perfect timing. They turned the disadvantage of being outnumbered into an advantage of being more nimble. First transport is away, Han Soo-young reported. 200 people aboard heading for the jump point. Time to second transport launch? 12 minutes. They're loading the children and elderly first. Captain Lee nodded. We hold for 12 more minutes. One of the Kralik ships managed to get a clear shot at the Aegis Dawn. Energy beams struck the human vessel's rear shields, overloading them completely. Sparks flew from control panels on the bridge and the lights went out for several seconds. Rear shields are down, engineering reported. We're venting atmosphere from Deck 7. Seal it off, Captain Lee ordered. Medical teams to emergency stations. Dr. Choi's voice came over the communication system. Captain, I'm reading injuries on Deck 7. Permission to send teams into the damaged area. Negative. Too dangerous until we can stabilize the hull. Sir, there are people hurt in there. I said no, Doctor. I won't lose medical personnel when we might need them later. Veltar noted this exchange with interest. Captain Lee was balancing multiple concerns: the immediate battle, the safety of his crew, and the larger mission of protecting civilians. He was making decisions that no computer algorithm could calculate, because they involved weighing different types of values against each other. The battle continued for another 10 minutes. The Aegis Dawn took more damage but kept fighting. The crew worked with increasing desperation as systems failed around them. Yet their determination never wavered. Second transport away, Han Soo-young announced. Full load, another 200 people. That leaves about 50 people still on the station, Captain Lee said. Can we get them all in one more transport? Yes, sir, but it will take 15 minutes to prep and load. The captain looked at the tactical display. His ship was badly damaged, outnumbered, and running low on weapons power. 15 more minutes seemed impossible. We'll give them 15 minutes, he said. Lieutenant Park found another creative solution. She used the gas giant's gravity well to slingshot the Aegis Dawn around one of the moons, gaining speed and changing direction in a way that confused the Kralik's targeting systems. The maneuver was dangerous and used up most of their remaining fuel, but it bought them precious time. During this phase of the battle, Veltar observed something that disturbed him deeply. When Engineering Officer Park Jinwoo was injured by an exploding console, the humans around him immediately stopped their work to help. Dr. Choi left her medical station to treat him personally. Even though it meant leaving other wounded crew members to her assistance, this was completely illogical. In a battle situation, the mission should take priority over individual casualties. Yet every human on the ship seemed to understand that taking care of each other was part of their duty, not separate from it. Even more strange, when Dr. Choi discovered that some of the injured were Kralik's prisoners from a ship they had damaged earlier, she treated them with the same care as her own crew. She used precious medical supplies on enemy soldiers who would probably return to fighting humans if they recovered. Doctor, Sergeant Kim asked, why are you wasting supplies on them? Because they're hurt and I'm a doctor, she replied simply. That's reason enough. Veltar tried to understand this behavior. The Kralik's empire was known for its cruelty. These soldiers had probably killed human civilians. They would certainly try to kill more humans if given the chance. Yet Dr. Choi treated them as if they were her own people. The final evacuation transport was almost ready when disaster struck. One of the Kralik ships managed to break through the Aegis Dawn's defensive pattern and fired directly at the research station. The station's weak shields failed immediately, and atmosphere began venting from several sections. Kepler Station is hit, Han Soo-young reported with panic in her voice. They're losing life support in the main lab complex. How many people are trapped in there? Captain Lee demanded. 23, including Dr. Martinez and his research team. The captain stood up from his chair. Veltar could see the human thinking through options, but none of them were good. The damaged sections of the station would be uninhabitable within minutes. The final transport could not dock with those areas safely. J1, Captain Lee called to Sergeant Kim. How fast can your Marines get over there? In this debris field? 10 minutes if we push hard. The people in that section don't have 10 minutes. Sergeant Kim nodded grimly. Then we'll have to do it in 5. The Marine shuttle launched from the Aegis Dawn while the ship continued its 3 months later, Veltar found himself in a situation his superiors had never planned for. The humans had not been defeated in 3 weeks as predicted. Instead, they had won their first battle and then kept winning. Now he was aboard the same human ship, still invisible to their sensors, watching them prepare for what they called the Siege of New Busan Colony. The colony was home to nearly 2 million humans, spread across 3 continents of a pleasant world, with blue oceans and green forests. It was also surrounded by a Kralix fleet of over 60 ships, 10 times larger than any human force in the sector. Veltar had sent increasingly confused reports to his superiors during the past months. The humans continued to make decisions that defied logical analysis, yet somehow these decisions led to victory after victory. The Thylaurian command had stopped responding to his messages 2 weeks ago. Captain Lee Do-hyun stood in the briefing room of the Aegis Dawn, now serving as flagship for a small human fleet of 6 ships. The captain looked older than he had 3 months ago. His hair showed streaks of gray and lines of worry marked his face. The constant stress of command during wartime was wearing on him. The situation is simple, Captain Lee told his senior officers. New Busan Colony is cut off and under siege. The Kralix have surrounded the planet with enough firepower to glass the entire surface. Our job is to break through their lines and evacuate as many civilians as possible. Lieutenant Park Minji, now promoted to commander, studied the tactical display with her usual intensity. Sir, the numbers are not good. 60 Kralix ships against our 6. Even if we had surprise on our side, which we don't, we'd be outnumbered 10 to 1. What are our advantages? The captain asked. Engineer Song Minho spoke up from his position at the table. We're faster and more maneuverable. Our ships can outrun theirs in open space. But we can't outrun them while carrying civilian transports, added Navigator Yoon Tae-hyuk. The refugee ships are slow and vulnerable. Sergeant Kim Jae-won leaned forward. What about the Colonial Defense Force? Surely they have some kind of military capability. Local militia only, Commander Park replied. Maybe 50 armed shuttles and a handful of system defense boats. Nothing that could stand up to a Kralix battlecruiser. Captain Lee walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Veltar could see him thinking, weighing impossible options. Any rational commander would acknowledge that this mission could not succeed. 2 million people could not be evacuated under the guns of 60 enemy warships. How long can the colony hold out? Captain Lee asked. Their planetary shields are strong, but the Kralix are pounding them constantly. Communications Officer Han Soo-young answered. Maybe a week before they break through. And how long would it take to evacuate 2 million people? With every civilian transport ship in human space? At least 3 months. The room fell silent. The mathematics were clear and brutal. There was no way to save New Busan Colony with conventional tactics. There has to be something, Captain Lee said quietly. Some angle we're not seeing. Commander Park pulled up star charts and defensive analyses. The Kralix have positioned themselves in a standard siege formation. 3 defensive rings around the planet, with overlapping fields of fire. It's textbook military strategy. Which means it has textbook weaknesses, the captain mused. Minji, what if we don't try to fight all 60 ships? What if we focus on creating a corridor? A corridor to where? The planet is completely surrounded. Captain Lee turned back to face his officers. Not to the planet. From the planet. If we can punch a hole in their formation and keep it open, we could run a continuous evacuation convoy. Sir, Commander Park said carefully, even if we could break through their lines, we couldn't hold a corridor open for more than a few minutes. They'd close ranks and cut off any ships trying to escape. Then we make it so they can't close ranks. Veltar listened to this exchange with growing fascination. The human officers were discussing a plan that was clearly impossible, yet they were treating it as if it might actually work. Their captain was asking them to find a way to defeat 60 ships with 6. The planning session continued for hours. The humans examined every aspect of the problem, looking for weaknesses and opportunities that might not be obvious. They discussed using asteroid fields for cover, employing electronic warfare to confuse enemy sensors, and coordinating with the colonial militia to create distractions. But the more they planned, the clearer it became that conventional tactics would not work. The Kralix had too many ships, too much firepower, and too strong a position. It was Dr. Choi Hyerin who suggested the idea that changed everything. What if we're thinking about this wrong? She said during a break in the planning. We're trying to fight a military battle, but this isn't really about military victory. It's about saving lives. What do you mean? Captain Lee asked. The Kralix want to conquer the colony, not destroy it. They need the infrastructure and resources intact. That means they have to be careful about how much damage they do to the planet itself. Commander Park's eyes lit up with understanding. So if we could make them choose between military victory and preserving what they came to capture, they might hesitate, Captain Lee finished. And hesitation creates opportunity. The plan that emerged from this discussion was unlike anything in standard military doctrine. Instead of trying to defeat the Kralix fleet, the humans would make the siege too costly to continue. They would turn the enemy's own goals against them. The first phase began when the human fleet approached New Busan colony. But instead of attacking the Kralix formation directly, they scattered into 6 different directions. Each ship took a different route through the outer system, avoiding direct confrontation while setting up for coordinated strikes. Veltar observed from the bridge of the Aegis Dawn as Captain Lee implemented his plan. The ship approached the planet's moon, using it as cover while deploying a network of sensor probes and communication relays. Minji, are you reading the Kralix patrol patterns? The captain asked. Yes, sir. They're maintaining standard formation, but they're starting to react to our presence. 2 ships breaking off to investigate our position. Let them come. So Young, open a channel to the other ships. Channel open, sir. All ships, this is Lee. Execute pattern alpha in 3 minutes. Remember, we're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to save lives. The coordinated attack began with precision timing. All 6 human ships struck different points in the Kralix formation simultaneously, but they were not trying to destroy enemy vessels. Instead, they targeted sensor arrays, communication systems, and shield generators. The attacks were surgical and limited, designed to confuse and disrupt, rather than inflict maximum damage. Within minutes, the Kralix formation was partially blind and struggling to coordinate their response. But the real genius of the plan became clear when the colonial militia joined the fight. The human officers had spent weeks coordinating with the Planetary Defense Force, not to engage in direct combat, but to create a very specific kind of chaos. The militia ships began attacking the Kralix formation from inside the siege perimeter. But they were not trying to break out. Instead, they were protecting something far more valuable, the planet's industrial infrastructure. Veltar watched in amazement as small, human ships deliberately positioned themselves between Kralix guns and critical facilities on the planet's surface. Factories, power plants, spaceports, and mining operations, all the things the Kralix needed to make their conquest worthwhile, they were suddenly shielded by human vessels willing to sacrifice themselves to protect them. The Kralix found themselves in an impossible position. They could destroy the human ships easily, but doing so would mean damaging or destroying the very infrastructure they had come to capture. Every shot they fired at the defenders risked reducing the value of their prize. Kralix formation is hesitating, Commander Park reported. They're holding fire on targets near critical infrastructure. Phase 2, Captain Lee ordered. The evacuation began immediately. While the Kralix debated how to proceed, civilian transports started launching from New Busan colony. But these were not random escape attempts. The humans had carefully planned routes that took advantage of the enemy's reluctance to fire near valuable targets. Refugee ships launched from spaceports adjacent to major factories. They flew escape routes that passed close to mining facilities and research centers. Each transport was essentially hiding behind something the Kralix wanted to preserve. The strategy worked for several hours. Thousands of civilians escaped while the Kralix struggled to respond without damaging their prize. But eventually, the enemy commanders adapted to the human tactics. Sir, Kralix ships are repositioning, Commander Park warned. They're moving to create firing lanes that avoid the critical infrastructure. How long before they have clean shots at the transports? Maybe 20 minutes, Captain Lee nodded grimly. Then we moved to Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of the plan. The 6 human warships abandoned their hit-and-run tactics and moved into direct confrontation with the Kralix fleet. Not to win, but to create maximum confusion and force the enemy to focus on immediate threats rather than escaping civilians. The Aegis Dawn dove straight into the heart of the Kralix formation, followed by the other 5 human ships. 6 months had passed since the siege of New Busan colony, and Veltar could no longer pretend he was just an observer. He had stopped sending reports to the Thylorian command weeks ago. The truth was too complicated to explain in their cold, analytical language. How could he describe what he had witnessed? How could he make them understand that everything they believed about humans was wrong? The war had changed dramatically since New Busan. Word of human mercy and honor had spread throughout the galaxy. Dozens of Kralix ships had defected, their crews refusing to fight an enemy that treated prisoners with dignity. Several minor species had declared their support for humanity, offering ships and supplies to the human cause. But more importantly, the humans themselves had changed. The crew of the Aegis Dawn was no longer the same group of people Veltar had first observed. They had been shaped by months of combat, loss, and impossible victories. They moved with quiet confidence now, secure in their abilities and united by shared purpose. Captain Lee Do-yun had become something more than just a ship commander. Other human captains looked to him for guidance, and even alien allies sought his advice. The tired young officer Veltar had first met was now a leader whose reputation stretched across the galaxy. Commander Park. Minji had developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate enemy movements and find creative solutions to tactical problems. Her strategies were studied by military academies on a dozen worlds. She had become famous for winning battles that should have been impossible. Dr. Choi Hyerin had treated wounded from 17 different species, earning the respect of beings who had never seen humans before. Her medical skills had saved lives that conventional treatment could not have helped. Several alien species had requested human medical training based on her work. Sergeant Kim Jae-won had become legendary among both human and alien Marines. His combination of tactical skill and moral courage inspired soldiers throughout the Alliance. Enemy commanders had been known to surrender specifically to him, trusting his promise of fair treatment. Even the younger crew members had grown into their roles. Engineer Song Minho could repair damage that other species considered irreparable. Communications officer Han Soo-young spoke 8 alien languages and had prevented 3 diplomatic incidents through her cultural sensitivity. Navigator Yoon Tae-hyuk could plot courses through hazards that stopped other pilots cold. Veltar had watched all of this development with growing admiration and deepening dread. Because he knew something the humans did not know, he had finally received new orders from the Thylaurian command, and those orders revealed the true scope of his people's plans. The message had come through encrypted channels during the battle for the Rigel system. Veltar had decoded it in privacy, away from the bridge where he spent most of his time watching the crew work. Observer Veltar. The message began in High Commander Zethyan's emotionless voice. Your reports have ceased, but our other monitoring systems continue to function. We are aware that the humans have exceeded initial projections for survival time. Veltar felt a chill as he listened to the cold words. Other monitoring systems? What other systems? This development was anticipated in our secondary calculations. We have been supplying advanced weapons to the Kralix Empire through intermediary species. Our goal was to ensure both civilizations destroy each other completely, leaving their territories and resources available for Thylaurian expansion. The message continued with casual brutality. The human resistance has proven more effective than projected, but this serves our purposes. The longer the war continues, the more both sides will exhaust their military capabilities. When they are sufficiently weakened, Thylaurian forces will intervene to restore peace by eliminating both civilizations. Veltar stopped the message and stared at the small device in his hands. His people were not just observing this war. They were orchestrating it. They had armed both sides and intended to let them destroy each other. The message resumed. Your new mission parameters are as follows. Identify critical human leaders and tactical capabilities. Prepare detailed assessments of their remaining military strength. When Thylaurian forces arrive in the sector, you will provide targeting data to ensure swift elimination of key resistance centers. The final words hit Veltar like a physical blow. Estimated timeline for Thylaurian intervention, 30 standard days. Prepare for transition from observation to active participation in final solution protocols. Veltar sat in the empty storage compartment where he had hidden to listen to the message. Around him, the Aegis Dawn hummed with the activities of a crew preparing for their next mission. These people trusted each other completely. They had shown him mercy and honor and courage beyond anything in his experience, and his own people expected him to help destroy them. The next few days were the most difficult of Veltar's long life. He continued his invisible observations, but now every interaction felt like betrayal. When Captain Lee made decisions that showed his tactical brilliance, Veltar was supposed to record them as intelligence for the coming Thylorian attack. When Dr. Choi saved the life of another wounded alien, Veltar was supposed to note it as evidence of human weakness that could be exploited. The breaking point came during the Battle of Proxima Station. The humans had launched their most ambitious offensive yet, attempting to capture a major Kralik supply depot. If successful, it would cut enemy supply lines and potentially end the war. Veltar watched from the bridge as Captain Lee coordinated the attack. The human fleet had grown to over 30 ships, including vessels from 6 allied species. But the humans were still outnumbered, and the Kraliks had fortified Proxima Station with massive defensive platforms. All ships. This is Captain Lee, the commander said over the fleet communication system. Today we have a chance to strike a blow that could end this war. But remember, we're not fighting for conquest or revenge. We're fighting to protect innocent lives and build a future where different species can live together in peace. The attack began with careful precision. Human ships worked alongside Zentari frigates, Volgan destroyers, and hegemony cruisers. The coordination was perfect, each species contributing their unique capabilities to the combined effort. But the Kraliks had prepared a trap. Hidden weapons platforms activated as the Allied fleet approached, catching them in crossfire that should have destroyed the entire force. That was when Veltar saw something that changed him forever. The humans could have retreated. They could have abandoned their alien allies and saved themselves. Instead, Captain Lee ordered his ships to shield the more vulnerable alien vessels, placing human lives at risk to protect beings they had only recently met. The Aegis Dawn took terrible damage while covering the retreat of a Zentari medical ship. Dr. Choi was injured when an explosion damaged the medical bay, but she continued treating wounded alien crew members even while her own people bandaged her injuries. Sergeant Kim led a boarding party to rescue trapped alien survivors from a damaged Volgan ship. His Marines fought through fire and radiation to save beings they could barely communicate with, risking their lives for people who were not even their own species. When the battle was over, the Allied fleet had taken heavy casualties but achieved their objective. Proxima Station was captured and the Kralik supply lines were severed. But more importantly, the bonds between the Allied species had grown stronger. Veltar watched alien commanders thank human officers for their sacrifice. He saw Zentari engineers working alongside human technicians to repair battle damage. He observed Volgan warriors, learning human tactical methods while teaching their own combat techniques. These people had created something that Veltar's species had never achieved in thousands of years of galactic dominance. They had built true cooperation between different civilizations. They had shown that war could create alliances instead of just destruction, and in 30 days, his people were going to destroy it all. That night, as the Aegis Dawn underwent repairs in a hidden asteroid base, Veltar made his decision. He could not watch these remarkable beings be slaughtered by his own people. He could not pretend to be neutral while genocide was planned in cold, logical detail, but revealing himself to warn the humans would make him a traitor to his entire species. It would mean abandoning everything he had been taught about loyalty and duty. It would mean accepting that his people, despite all their advancement and wisdom, were wrong about something fundamental. Veltar spent hours walking the corridors of the ship, invisible to the crew around him. He watched them work together with quiet efficiency, caring for each other even while preparing for the next battle. He saw Dr. Choi checking on wounded alien patients in the medical bay. He observed Captain Lee reviewing tactical plans while personally writing letters to the families of crew members who had died. These people had become more than research subjects to him. In 6 months of observation, he had seen them at their best and worst. He had watched them make mistakes and learned from them. He had seen them afraid and seen them brave. He had witnessed them show mercy to enemies and kindness to strangers. They were not perfect. They could be emotional and illogical. They made decisions based on feelings as much as facts. They sometimes acted against their own interests to help others. But those flaws were also... The revelation changed everything. Veltar had materialized on the bridge of the Aegis Dawn during the night watch, when only a skeleton crew was present. The shock of seeing a tall, pale blue figure suddenly appear from nowhere had caused immediate alarm. But his calm words and raised hands had prevented panic. "I am not your enemy," he had said in carefully practiced human language. My name is Veltar, and I have been observing your people for months. I come to warn you of great danger. Captain Lee had been awakened immediately. Within an hour, Veltar found himself in the ship's briefing room, surrounded by senior officers who listened with growing horror as he explained the truth about the Thylorian plan. Your people armed both sides? Dr. Choi asked, her voice filled with disbelief. They wanted us to destroy each other? It is standard Thylorian procedure when expanding into new territories, Veltar explained. Allow local conflicts to weaken potential opposition, then intervene to claim the resources. Your species and the Kraliks were expected to eliminate each other within months. Commander Park studied the star charts Veltar had provided, showing Thylorian fleet positions and capabilities. These ships, they're using technology centuries ahead of anything we have. How are we supposed to fight them? You are not, Veltar said simply. That is why I am here. My people do not expect resistance because they believe no logical species would fight a battle they could not win. Captain Lee leaned back in his chair, processing the information. But you think we might fight anyway? I have observed human behavior for 6 months. You do not make decisions based purely on logic. You fight for principles, for each other, for the future you want to create. Logic would demand surrender, but humans choose honor over survival. The planning that followed was unlike anything in military history. Veltar provided detailed intelligence about Thylorian technology, tactics, and psychology. He explained their weaknesses, few as they were, and helped human strategists understand how his people thought. The Thylorians have not fought a real war in over 1,000 years, Veltar explained during one planning session. They are accustomed to overwhelming technological superiority, leading to quick surrender. They have no experience with enemies who refuse to give up. What about their individual fighting ability? Sergeant Kim asked. Are they warriors? They are scientists and administrators. Physical courage is not valued in our society. We have eliminated the need for it through technology and logical planning. Captain Lee studied the tactical displays showing both fleets. The human alliance had grown to nearly 100 ships, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned by the Thylorian force. What's their biggest weakness? Emotional detachment, Veltar answered without hesitation. My people see war as a mathematical problem to be solved efficiently. They do not understand sacrifice, loyalty, or fighting for something greater than oneself. This makes them predictable. The battle plan that emerged was both brilliant and desperate. The humans could not defeat the Thylorian fleet in direct combat. But they might be able to do something more important. They might be able to show the galaxy that the Thylorians could be defeated. We're not trying to win a war, Captain Lee explained to the fleet commanders during their final briefing. We're trying to win an idea. If we can prove that the Thylorians are not invincible, other species will find the courage to resist them. The first phase of the battle began when the Thylorian fleet moved to surround the asteroid base where the human alliance had gathered. High Commander Zethian had given the humans 24 hours to surrender. When that deadline passed, the Thylorian ships began their attack. Veltar watched from the bridge of the Aegis Dawn as his own people demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. Thylorian weapons carved through human shields like they were made of paper. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, executing maneuvers that should have ended the battle within minutes. But the humans had learned something during their war with the Kraliks. They had learned that surviving was more important than winning, and that small victories could add up to something larger. The human ships scattered in all directions, refusing to form up into the large formations that Thylorian weapons could eliminate efficiently. They broke into small groups that attacked from unexpected angles, forced the enemy to split their attention, and retreated before the Thylorians could bring their full firepower to bear. It was not heroic. It was not glorious, but it worked. Human vessels are not engaging in proper battle formation, reported a Thylorian tactical officer, his voice carrying confusion that Veltar had never heard from his people before. They are attempting to delay their inevitable defeat, High Commander Zethian replied. Increase weapon power and destroy them systematically. But systematic destruction was exactly what the humans were refusing to allow. Every time the Thylorians focused on one group of ships, another group would attack from a different direction. When Thylorian ships moved to eliminate these new threats, the original targets would disappear into asteroid fields or behind planetary masses. Dr. Choi had set up emergency medical stations throughout the asteroid base, treating wounded from dozens of species as the battle raged around them. Her work had taken on new importance as more alien species arrived to join the fight against the Thylorians. Word of the battle was spreading throughout the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Communications relays carried news that someone was actually fighting the Thylorian collective and surviving. Species that had submitted to Thylorian rule centuries ago began to hope that freedom might be possible. Captain, Communications Officer Han Soo-young reported during a brief lull in the fighting. We're receiving messages from 17 different star systems. Local resistance groups are asking for tactical support and coordination. Captain Lee managed a tired smile. Send them everything we've learned about Thylorian weaknesses, and tell them that courage is contagious. The battle continued for 18 hours. The Human Alliance lost ship after ship, but each loss bought time and information. Every successful attack taught them more about Thylorian defensive systems. Every escape showed them new ways to exploit their enemies' predictable responses. Veltar found himself torn between pride and grief as he watched both sides fight. His people displayed the cold efficiency that had made them masters of the galaxy, but they also showed the emotional blindness that was their greatest weakness. They could not understand why an obviously defeated enemy continued to resist. The humans and their allies fought with desperate creativity, turning every disadvantage into a potential opportunity. When their weapons proved ineffective against Thylorian shields, they used them to collapse asteroid tunnels that trapped enemy ships. When their ships were too slow to escape, they used that slowness to lure Thylorian vessels into carefully prepared ambushes. But the cost was terrible. Veltar watched as ship after ship was destroyed, carrying people he had come to know and respect. The Zentari medical vessel that Dr. Choi had saved months ago was vaporized while evacuating wounded. The Volgan cruiser that had fought alongside humans at Proxima Station died trying to protect a damaged human frigate. The end came when the Thylorians finally adapted their tactics to counter human unpredictability. High Commander Zethian ordered her ships to ignore the human attacks and focus entirely on destroying the asteroid base. If they could eliminate the command center, the scattered human ships would be leaderless and vulnerable. All ships, this is Captain Lee, came the final transmission from the Aegis Dawn. They're concentrating everything on the base. We can't stop them all. Veltar felt his heart breaking as he realized what was about to happen. The humans had fought impossibly well, but they could not overcome the mathematics of superior technology and numbers. That was when Captain Lee made his final decision. All civilian ships, begin immediate evacuation, he ordered. Military vessels form up on the Aegis Dawn. We're going to buy them time to escape. What followed was the most heroic and tragic action Veltar had ever witnessed. The remaining human warships formed a defensive line between the Thylorian fleet and the fleeing civilian vessels. They knew they could not win. They knew they were going to die, but they fought anyway because someone had to. The Aegis Dawn led the charge directly into the Thylorian formation. Captain Lee's ship was already damaged and low on ammunition, but it flew straight at the enemy flagship with weapons blazing. Commander Park had calculated the exact approach that would force the Thylorians to divide their fire between multiple targets. For the Alliance, Captain Lee's voice rang out over all frequencies as his ship accelerated toward certain destruction. The response came from every human ship in the battle.
For the Alliance!
Even ships from other species took up the cry, shouting it in their own languages as they followed the humans into the final fight. Veltar watched in anguish as the Aegis Dawn's hull cracked under Thylorian fire. He saw Dr. Choi's medical bay torn open to space, the gentle healer who had treated enemies with the same care as friends lost to the vacuum. He saw Sergeant Kim leading his Marines in a desperate boarding action against a Thylorian cruiser, the honorable warrior who had shown mercy to captured enemies falling to weapons that knew nothing of honor.